You shouldn't do that. That is counterproductive to everything else. If you were to postpone the elections, the rest of the world will always believe there is some trickery or deceit, and everybody's watching. This election is the most important election for the entire continent of Africa, not just Nigeria, because everyone is watching. All the countries of Africa, they are watching and observing, and so is the Western world. That is why just yesterday the Secretary of State came to visit, is because it's an important time for Nigeria, and for them to postpone the elections, it'd be the worst thing to do at this moment. And then, if they were to do so, I believe it will resort to violence.
The postponement will result to violence.
I believe so.
Well, there are some who also believe that should the election hold, it might still trigger certain violence from some quarters. What do you make out of it?
There will be violence because Boko Haram is probably going to try to disrupt it as much as they can. But it's better for the little disruption by Boko Haram than postponing the entire election. And if they were to postpone the entire election, it will be even worse than Boko Haram, because people throughout the country, I believe, and this is just because of the experience that you see all over the world, if they were to do so, the entire country will explode.
And now, if there is a possible postponement of the election, what do you think will be the consequence of that on Nigerians?
Well, first of all, the rest of the world will think that there is trickery and deceit. The Nigerians will believe that they were not treated fairly and they didn't get a chance to actually participate in choosing a new government. But I think supporters of both parties would resort to some form of rioting or demonstrations, and demonstrations, even though they may begin peacefully, will resort to sometimes turn into riots, and the riots definitely sometimes turn into violence. The fact is, they cannot do it. It's not the right time to do that. And if there is a little bit of disruption by Boko Haram, which they will try to disrupt it, it is still not good enough to postpone the elections.
All right, still not good enough to postpone the election. But looking at it from a legal point of view now, not necessarily coming from a culture that live within the perimeters of towns that were mostly hit, but on legal perspective now. There is a constitution, a section of the constitution that says when a nation is at war, but when Nigeria is at war, and it is eminent now that some will tell you that Nigeria is at war, but I will still ask you that, and that if the country is at war, the country shouldn't go into elections. Now, the question is, do you see Nigeria at war?
No. Yes, there is some conflict and there is a Boko Haram insurgency, but it's not, when a country is at war, it means the entire country is at war. There is destruction, people are shipping out to go to war, there is just mayhem and things are just not functioning. It's not so throughout Nigeria. There are people in the south who go along, business as usual.
There are people from particular cultures who are actually being hit by these insurgents. They saw it, they felt it, and they tested it. And such quarters now, if you ask them, they will say, of course, Nigeria is at war. But do they have reasons to make such assertion that Nigeria is at war?
Nigeria is not at war. There is insurgency and conflict that is going on up here in the northeast, and there are 3 states that are particularly hurt and damaged by what is going on. But the rest of Nigeria is not so much affected by all of this that's going on. Life goes on in Abuja and Lagos and Port Harcourt and Niger Delta, and so it's not as if the whole country is at war. Where we are is experiencing this. Now, there is a truth in the fact that Boko Haram is going to try to prevent people from voting, and it's also, as a result of that, the election officials are going to be afraid to go into areas that that are deemed dangerous. And yes, they have to be concerned about it, but the concern is not so great for them to postpone the elections as a result of that. You have to weigh the cost-benefit analysis. Is it so bad that we have to postpone the elections? I don't think so. And I think that, yes, we are having some problems up here, but the problems are not so great that the entire nation must suffer as a result of that.
All right. Now, looking at the event now and the scheme of things, before now, the United States of America refused to sell certain weapons to Nigeria, in order to curtail the Boko Haram sect. And now we hear the United States also saying Nigeria should not postpone the election. And also the United States says it will not support the collaborations between Chad and Cameroon with the involvement of Nigeria to make it a triumph force to counter the insurgents. What is the problem between United States of America and Nigeria, particularly in such a time as this?
Well, the United States is supporting Nigeria still. And there is misconception that the United States does not support Nigeria. The United States is in support of Nigeria. That is why the Secretary of State came and made it known that you should conduct the elections. And if you are to conduct the elections, or if you were to conduct it, and it was violence-free, and it was fair, transparent, and everybody can see what's going on, then they are more open to support you and give you more support, more military support. But the way things are going now, the rest of the world, when they see the things that are taking place, they have to be very cautious and careful how they are going to give their support. For example, there is no way that any country is going to give the Nigerian government sophisticated weapons to use when the military is leaving them in the armory for Boko Haram to pick up, to use against the people.
But now, even though the United States knows that the greatest monster now that the country is battling with is the Boko Haram sect, and for a peaceful election to take place, there must be a total cessation of bloodshed. And the possibility of achieving this is when the armory is well equipped.
Well, that is true, but to an extent, you do not need all these sophisticated weaponry to fight terrorism. It's a fallacy. It's a false notion that people believe you need all of these sophisticated weapons to fight Boko Haram. All you need is a heart and a desire to defend your country and to die for your country. And if you can look and see the Bushman with a den gun that only fires one shot at a time can go out there and take on Boko Haram, how is it that your armed forces, uniformed forces who have at least the AK-47 cannot do it as effectively as them? So it is heart, it's desire, is a wanting to die for your country, for your flag, for your constitution.
Right.
If you don't have it, I don't care how many weapons of sophisticated types you have, it won't work.
Now, well, talking about matters of integrity now, but looking at the recent events where about 54 soldiers of the Nigerian army were sentenced to death, by they were court-martialed and actually sentenced to death because they withdrew to repel an attack, on the Boko Haram sect before the captured Mubi. But individually, some of these soldiers were actually laying their cards on the table. They said they were not actually given the command, the willpower, to attack. Now, you're talking about heart now. Of course, they had the heart, but they were not given the platform for the heart to express what it felt on the inside. If commands were to come from the superior officers to withdraw, so that the insurgents can have an uphold over and overrun Mubi, then there is the problem, not just the problem of the heart, but the problem of equipment of the armory. Do you still concur to that?
No, I still disagree. you need a heart and a desire. I can give me 10 Nigerians who are willing to die for their country, and I will promise you, I can take 10 Nigerians who are willing to die for their country. I'll defend any fort, any military base, anywhere, just 10. I can do it.
Just 10.
10.
Okay, let's assume you are given the 10 now. And each of the 10 have pairs of magazine on their AK-47, while the insurgency are coming with dozens of magazine, you know, and maybe that's what even make them trigger friendly or trigger happy to shoot sporadically wherever they go to. So what do you make of this? Does it really give an edge for the military to counteract the possible and imminent attack of the Boko Haram?
Die doing your job. That is why you joined the military.
So you're saying that most Nigerian soldiers don't want to die?
Well, you don't want to die. You know, does Boko Haram want to live or die? Do they care?
Well, some of them might say they are fighting against people who don't care to die.
The fact is, when you join the military, you take an oath to defend your country and the Constitution, and you to defend enemies, domestic and international. And you have you signed an agreement that you will die serving your country, not run away. You will die. So if you know you do not want to die for your country, do not join the police, don't join the military.
That is another point. Well, I think it will be a discussion for another day where we look at the propensity that led people to join in military, not necessarily having a passion for the job. Now, back to the basis now. Election, general election is forthcoming in less than 3 weeks now. And of course, people have been on the show here, particularly those who hail from Michika, Madagali, and Mubi. They agitated for the postponement of the election, of course, no doubt about it. And even if you can walk down the road, some people can still tell you the same. But the United States say Nigeria should not postpone, and they gave her reasons. Now, if Nigeria wouldn't postpone the election, if Nigeria should go to the polls, what are the necessary things Nigeria should do that will serve as rudiments, you know, for people to have that joy to go to the polls and vote, you know, in such a peaceful atmosphere?
Well, first of all, both parties have got to come together. The PDP and the APC and whoever else, they have to come together and work as one to support people being able to go to vote. And that is, in and of itself, is very crucial, because they are the ones who are going to incite people to violence. So let us suppose that they did that properly and there's no violence amongst the electorates and the voters. Then the only place you will find violence is from Boko Haram. Then what the government needs to do is heavily militarize those areas. Take the people from the peaceful areas, bring the military into the areas that are prone to violence, and give them that protection, that reassurance that they will protect these people and give them the right to vote. But many of these people are displaced, and they did not give them that ability to vote. And these are things that people have suggested to the Nigerian government, that you should put things in place for all of these displaced people. There's almost 1 million people, it could be more, to give them the ability to vote, and it was not done.
Now, I know, Lionel, being a U.S. Marine, you have this confidence in the military so much, you know, and but the electorate themselves, you know, the electorate themselves, how will this confidence be built in them due to the fact that maybe some of them might say the military didn't really protect them before now, but how sure are they that even in the place of election they can be protected fully?
That's a very good question. The people have lost trust in the armed forces and the security forces, and they're not sure if these people are equipped or prepared or have the desire to protect them. They're not sure. So this is an opportunity for your armed forces or your security forces to prove to them, to the people,
an opportunity to
this is an opportunity to prove. that I will give you your most basic right, which is your right to vote. I will protect you, and I will ensure that nothing becomes of you. And if I can do that and ensure those people and make sure that they can indeed go to the polls and vote without being killed or maimed, that is a good step in the right direction. That will start developing some more confidence in the armed forces and in your security forces. But until they do that, there is a lot of doubt, like you said.